Hey, it's Medium Jenny Lee, and I'm here with the next Raw Contact Volume 2. This is going to be Session 61. This will be video number 6 of the new series. All right, Session 61 is from July 8th of 1981. I'm almost born. The next month. The next month in a couple weeks. Could you give us an indication of the instrument's condition? Dawn is very adamant about this every session of this book so far. The instrument's vital energies are improving. The physical complex distortions are quite marked at this space-time, and there is a decrease in physical complex energies. So vital energy is going up, but there's less physical energy. Is there anything in particular that the instrument could do to improve the condition? The instrument has two factors affecting its bodily distortions. This is in common with all those which, by seniority of vibration, have reached the green ray level of vibratory consciousness complexes. So green ray is the heart chakra. So it's Ra saying that people that are living in that green ray energy and that heart-centered heart chakra energy, they've moved up the ranks and they're at the heart now, have some physical distortions. Wonderful. Something to look forward to. The first is the given in-streamings, which vary from cycle to cycle in predictable manner. In this particular entity, the cyclical complexes at the space-time nexus are not favorable for physical energy levels. So that cycling of the energy that gets talked about a lot in this book is whatever's happening with that isn't good for her in particular. The second ramification of condition is that which we might call the degree of mental efficiency in use of catalyst provided for the learning of programmed lessons, in particular the lessons of love in general. Isn't that interesting that someone whose heart-centered heart chakra has moved up the ranks to that level, that fourth level density of energy, is having problems mentally using the lessons of love? That's kind of weird. This instrument, unlike some entities, has some further distortion due to the use of the pre-incarnative conditions. Can you expand on what you mean by these cycling in-streamings of energy? Yes, please. There are 4 types of cycles, which are those given in the moment of entry into incarnation. There are, in addition, more cosmic and less regularized inpourings, which from time to time affect the sensitized mind-body-spirit complex. The 4 rhythms are, to some extent, known among your peoples and are called biorhythms. So a cycle from when you come into incarnation, and also, to me, it sounds like the cycling of our astrology, planets and stars and moons and stuff. There is a 4th cycle, which we may call the cycle of gateway of magic, of the adept or of the spirit. This is a cycle which is completed in approximately 18 of your diurnal cycles, which just means days. So each 18 days, there's a cycle for the adept of these spiritual woo-woo magical things. People who are trying to learn and progress. The cosmic patterns are also a function of the moment of incarnative entrance and have to do with your satellite you call the moon. Yeah. Your planets of this galaxy, the galactic sun, and in some cases, the in-streamings of the major galactic points of energy flow. There's a footnote there, and the footnote says, To see a graph depicting the 18-day adept cycle, see the reference series. Also see a tool for charting the other biorhythms by going to www.bringforth, that's 4th.org/biorhythms/. I haven't done that yet. That would be interesting to see. So it's like an 18-day cycle from the time you were born. But then there's also the cycle of the moon and the stars and the planets and the sun and all that stuff. Would it be helpful to plot the cycles for the instrument and attempt to have these sessions at the most favorable points with respect to the cycle? To that specific query, we have no response because I'm sure it's a free will thing. It may be noted that the three in this triad, Don, Carla, and Jim, bring in this energy pattern, which is raw. Thus, each energy input of the triad is of note. So it's the three of them together that are bringing raw through. So all three of their cycles are important. We may say that while these information systems are interesting, they are in sway only so far as the entity or entities involved have not made total efficient use of the catalyst, and therefore, instead of accepting the, shall we say, negative or retrograde moments or periods without undue notice, have the distortion towards the retaining of these distortions in order to work out the unused catalyst. It's like, my brain was like, okay, I think I got this. And then it just kept going. And now I'm like, Okay, so they're saying that this tracking the cycles that they're talking about, these biorhythms, don't necessarily work all the way unless you're actually you're making total use of all of your catalysts. Which catalysts are just things that prompt you to learn and grow and teach and to learn, teach, and teach, learn, and all that stuff. So if you're not using up all of the things that are teaching you to grow, then the cycles aren't necessarily going to be fully effective. It is to be noted that psychic attack continues upon this entity, although it is only effective at this time in physical distortions toward discomfort. So remember, there's this Orion group, this is like the bad guys, and somebody in the Orion group doesn't want Ra communicating with them, so they're going after Carla because she's like physically the weakest, and she's also the most loving and open, so she's less likely to fight it off. But the bad guys don't realize that the love is kind of the thing that also is keeping her safe. You know what I'm saying? We may suggest that it is always of some interest to observe the roadmap, both of the cycles and of the planetary and other cosmic influences, and that one may see certain wide roads or possibilities. However, we remind that this group is a unit. So yeah, you can look at those cycles to kind of gain a better insight. But this particular group of people is working together for this particular work. So it's important that they look at all of them, all three. Is there some way that we could, as a unit then, do something to reduce the effect of psychic attack on the instrument and optimize the communicative opportunity? We have given you the information concerning that which aids this particular mind-body-spirit complex, Carla. We can speak no further. It is our opinion, which we humbly offer, that each in this remarkable harmony with each for this particular third density illusion at this space-time nexus. I don't really know what that sentence means. I feel like there's something missing in it. I want to ask a few questions Jim had here about the healing exercises. The first is, in the healing exercise concerning the body, what do you mean by the disciplines of the body having to do with the balance between love and wisdom and the use of the body in its natural function? We shall speak more briefly than usual due to this instrument's use of the transferred energy. We therefore request further queries if your reply is not sufficient. And then I wrote, this is brief, because it's like, it's the whole rest of this page. I think that's a lot to me. The body complex has natural functions. Many of these have to do with the unmanifested self and are normally not subject to the need for balancing. There are natural functions which have to do with other self. Among these are touching, loving, the sexual life, and those times when the company of another is craved to combat the type of loneliness which is the natural function of the body, as opposed to those types of loneliness which are of the mind, emotion complex, or of the spirit. So a physical loneliness versus a mental and emotional loneliness. When these natural functions may be observed in the daily life, they can be examined in order that the love of self and the love of other self versus the wisdom regarding the use of natural functions may be observed. There are many fantasies and stray thoughts which may be examined in most of your peoples in this balancing process. What you talking about, Ra? This is getting spicy. Equally to be balanced is the withdrawal from the need for these natural functions with regard to other self. On one hand, there is an excess of love. It must be determined whether this is love of self or other self or both. On the other hand, there is an overbalance towards wisdom. So are they like, is he specifically talking about Jim and Carla here, or is he specifically talking about Jim? I think he must be specifically talking about Jim because it's Jim's question. But I'm sure this applies to everybody as well. It is well to know the body complex so that it is an ally, balanced and ready to be cleared, used as a tool for each bodily function, may be used in higher and higher complexes of energy with other self. I underlined all of that. So I must have thought it was important when I read it the first time. Let's read it again. It is well to know that the body complex, so that it is an ally, it's working with you, balanced and ready to be cleared and used as a tool. For each body function may be used in higher and higher complexes of energy with other self. The physical. Talking about the physical bodily functions. Which in the first book they do go into the how sex is related to different chakras and how the goal is to move past the lower chakras and up into the higher chakras when it comes to that. That's really would be the greatest function of that experience. So I wonder if that's what he's talking about here. Or I wonder if that's what Ra is talking about. It's not necessarily a he, although we kind of refer to it as a he. No matter what the behavior, the important balancing is the understanding of each interaction on this level with the other selves, so that whether the balance may be love, wisdom, or wisdom, love, the other self is seen by the self in a balanced configuration, and the self is thus freed from further work. Second question, could you give an example of how feelings affect portions of the body and the sensations of the body? It is nearly impossible to speak generally of these mechanisms, for each entity of proper superiority has its own programming. Of the less aware entities, we may say that the connection will often seem random as the higher self continues producing catalyst until a bias occurs. In each programmed individual, the sensitivities are far more active, and as we have said, the catalyst not used fully by the mind and spirit is given to the body. Get a little more specific there about this catalyst stuff. So the seniority thing is like people that have worked up through the different levels of the density. People who either are at the upper end of the third density, or they're wanderers or whatnot, who are higher level and have come back to, for whatever purpose. Those are the people that need to use the catalyst fully, or it gets used by the physical body. And the people who are still working up the levels there, they're not really aware of it. The higher self is still working on using catalysts to create a bias. Thus, you may see in this entity the numbing of the arms and hands signify this entity's failure to surrender to the loss of control over the life. Thus, this drama is enacted in the physical distortion complex, which I think they're talking about Jim here. So Jim must be having numbing of hands and arms because he's not surrendering to the loss of control over his life. In the questioner, which is Jim, we may see the desire not to be carrying the load it carries, given a physical manifestation of the soreness of those muscles for carrying used. That which is truly needed to be carried is a pre-incarnative responsibility which seems highly inconvenient. I think there's a lot in there that could be read between the lines, and I want to know more, but I don't think they really go into it. In the case of the scribe, which is Dawn, you know what? I wonder if I got them backwards. No. Because Jim was the person who asked the question, but Dawn is the person asking the question aloud. In the case of the scribe, so when I read this the first time, I was trying to figure out who they were talking about. Is the questioner Jim or Dawn? Because Jim asked the question, but Dawn is physically asking the question. And who writes it down? Is it Jim or is it Dawn? And I was pretty sure it was Dawn, because he's the one who writes the questions down. I don't know who was writing it down after it was recorded. So I'm going to say I thought it was Jim was the questioner and Dawn was the scribe, but I could be wrong about that. In the case of the scribe, we see a weariness and a numbness of feelings ensuing from lack of using catalysts designed to sensitize this entity to quite significant influxes of unfamiliar distortion complexes of the mental and emotional and spiritual level. As the numbness removes itself from the higher or more responsive complexes, the bodily complex distortions will vanish. This is also true also of the other examples. I'm not really sure what they're talking about in that paragraph. We would note at this time that the totally efficient use of catalysts upon your plane is extremely rare. So I'm going to say it's all right if I don't know what they're talking about, because nobody can do it. There's very few people that are totally efficiently using all of their catalysts at all times. I think that that's very true. Can you tell me how you are able to give us information like this with respect to the first distortion or law of confusion? It's like the law of free will. Each of those is already aware of this information. Huh? For real? Any other reader may extract the heart of meaning from this discussion without interest as to the example's sources. If each was not fully aware of these answers, we could not speak. So Ross saying they already knew the answers to this, and that's why it was okay if they said it. It is interesting that in many of your queries you ask for confirmation rather than information. This is acceptable to us. That's because we as humans question every single thing raw. I'm sure you know that by now. Yes, you just told us, but we would like to know again. Is it for real? This brings out the point of the purpose for the physical incarnation, I believe, and that it is to reach a conviction through your own thought process as to a solution to problems and understandings in a totally unbiased or totally free situation with no proof at all or anything that you would consider proof. Proof being a very poor word in itself. Can you expand on my concept? Your opinion is an eloquent one, although somewhat confused in its connections between the freedom expressed by subjective knowing and the freedom expressed by subjective acceptance. There is a significant distortion between the two, between knowing and accepting. There's a significant distortion between knowing and accepting. Yes. And then here's one of my favorite parts. Put a ha-ha on it. This is not a dimension of knowing. Rod just said, y'all don't know shit. Yes, Ra, we know we don't know shit. This is not a dimension of knowing, even subjectively, due to the lack of an overview of cosmic and other inpourings which affect each and every situation which produces catalysts. We've got so many goddamn catalysts on this planet at this time-space nexus in this third density illusion. We don't know what the hell's going on. The subjective acceptance of that which is at the moment and the finding of love within that moment is the greater freedom. Let's read that again because it bears repeating. The acceptance, the subjective acceptance of that which is at the moment and the finding of love within that moment is the greater freedom. So not the knowing, but the just being okay with the not knowing. Just accepting what's happening in the moment and finding love in it. Beautiful. That known as the subjective knowing without proof is in some degree a poor friend. For there will be anomalies no matter how much information is garnered due to the distortions which form third density. Man, that just like... Okay. So, this is something that continuously comes up over and over and over again with logical mind people and academic type people and scientifically minded people. They don't want to accept anything until they know they have all the proof that something exists or that's the way it works. And I just keep finding the problem with that over and over and over and over and over and over and over, because it just seems like no matter how much proof does get discovered or shown, that it's never enough, or something shows up to contradict it, therefore discrediting the proof that was found before. So this sentence just makes so much sense to me. The subjective knowing without proof is in some degree a poor friend, for there will be anomalies no matter how much information is garnered due to the distortions from which form third density. There's so many distortions in this reality that we exist in this third density, that there's always going to be something that throws off the proof. So the accepting what's happening in the moment, the finding love in the moment, is what's best. Not having to know everything, just accepting what is right now. I really like that. I put a frowny face next to it originally. Probably because I was pissed off that we wouldn't know everything. But now I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of nice. The third question I have here is, could you give examples of bodily polarity? Within the body, there are many polarities which relate to the balancing of the energy centers of the various bodies of the unmanifested entity. It is well to explore polarities for work in healing. Each entity is, of course, a potential polarized portion of an other self. Huh? There's a lot of huns in this session. What you talking about, Ron? I'm not really sure what that means either. Maybe we'll get more into it here. I'm not sure. It says here, it would seem the proper balancing exercises for all the sensations of the body would be some form of inactivity, such as meditation or contemplation. Is this correct? It is largely incorrect. The balancing requires a meditative state in order for the work to be done. However, the balancing of sensation has to do with an analysis of the sensation with especial respect to an unbalanced leaning between the love and the wisdom, or the positive and the negative. Then whatever is lacking in the balanced sensation is, as in all balancing, allowed to come into the being after the sensation is remembered and recalled in such detail as to overwhelm the senses. So you have to experience the stuff. You can't just meditate on it. You have to experience the stuff first. And then when you're going back and remembering it, that's when you're doing it in a meditative state. Could you tell me why it's important for the appurtenances, I don't know if I'm ever saying that word right, and other things to be so carefully aligned with respect to this instrument, and why just a small ruffle in the sheet by the instrument causes a problem with the reception of Ra? So those appurtenances, or however you say it, are all the things that they put up around Carla's head. The Bible, the candle, the glass of water, and it all has to be like very specifically laid out and like perfect. Like they got to measure it and stuff, like the degrees of how it's pointed towards her and all these things. And then they have to put her hair out in a certain way. She's got to be laid out on the bed and the pillows and the sheets and the blankets. And it's like everything has to be very specific for Carla to be able to do this channeling. So that's what Dawn wants to know about. We may attempt an explanation. This contact is narrow band. The instrument is highly sensitive. Thus, we have good entry into and can use it as use it to an increasingly satisfactory level. However, the trance condition is not one which is without toll upon this instrument. Therefore, the area above the entrance to the physical complex above her head of this instrument must be kept clear to avoid discomfort to the instrument, especially as it re-enters the body complex. So there can't be a lot of stuff in the way. But that's interesting because they do have a table up above her head with all this stuff that I just mentioned on it. So that is interesting. The appurtenances give to this instrument sensory input and mental visualization which aid in the trance beginning. The careful alignment of these is important for the energizing group in that it is a reminder to that support group that it is time for a working, which is what I always say about all of these things, these ritualistic things that people that do this type of work, any kind of work, spiritual work, magical work, we have these rituals that we do, and it's only to really get us ready to do the work. Like for me, I light a candle, I light an incense, I burn some sage, I burn some Palo Santo, I go with that around in a circle around my space, I do a little meditation, and that's when I know that I'm ready to work. Do I actually need to do all of those things? No. Did Carla actually have to have all this stuff like specifically aligned up above her head? No. But that's the way that the people who do this work make it known that they're ready to work. And I also think that it signifies and shows to spirit and to other beings, and that we're like the open sign is on, you know? Okay, I'm doing all this stuff. Now I'm ready to work. Now you can come talk to me. That's what it feels like to me. The ritualistic behaviors are triggers for many energies of the support group. You may have noticed more energy being used and workings as the number has increased due to the long-term effect of such ritualistic actions. Yeah. The more that they do it, the more it becomes part of the process of the working. So the more it's bringing in all of that energy. This would not aid another group as it was designed for this particular system of mind, body, spirit complexes, and especially the instrument, which is what I had figured out a long time ago. Only Carla and Don and Jim need these specific things in this specific way. It had nothing to do with the objects. It had nothing to do with the alignments. It had nothing to do with none of that stuff. It had to do with them. These are the things. These are the actions that were best for them to make them feel like now is the time to do this, and to put their belief in it that it was going to work. I'm doing this because I know if I do this, it's going to work. But that wasn't those specific things. It was the belief in those specific things. Okay, then I will ask this one. Can you tell us the purpose of the frontal lobes of the brain and the conditions necessary for this activation? The frontal lobes of the brain will have much more use in fourth density. Interesting. The primary mental emotive condition of this large area of the so-called brain is joy or love in its creative sense. Thus, the energies we have discussed in relation to the pyramids, all of the healing, the learning, the building, the energizing, are to be found in this area. This is the area tapped by the adept. And I wrote tingling next to it, because myself and many other people that begin doing spiritual work and connecting to other energies out there, we experience head tingling. So the fact that they're talking about the frontal lobes being part of all of this stuff, that's where a lot of the tingling happens for me. It does happen all over my head, but a lot of times it's right up there in the front by the frontal lobes. This is the area which, working through the trunk and the root of mind, make contact with intelligent energy, and thus the gateway, intelligent infinity. That's the area of the brain that's doing the work. Are there any other queries before we leave the instrument? Can we make her more comfortable? This instrument's somewhat distorted, but you're doing well. And that's the end of session 61. So, to review, session 61 goes over some different cycles or biorhythms of our bodies, minds, and spirits. Talks about how they're important, but they're only really, really important if we're using all of our catalysts, which nobody really is. But they can be a good roadmap. They can give us some good insight. So it's worth looking at your biorhythms, that 18-day cycle from the time you were born, and of course, our astrology things. Which, remember, if you would like to do your 18-day cycle, you can go to www.bringforth, that's 4, number 4, th.org /biorhythms /. Maybe I'll put that link down in the description box. Maybe I'll go try it out myself and see what it's got to say. Then it goes into some about how physical things affect our catalysts, our minds, our spirits, our emotions, what that's all about. And then they give some examples that are specific to Jim and Don about how their specific catalysts are causing physical distortions. So I guess really that was all part of one section there. Then my favorite part was we don't know anything. This dimension is not for knowing. We can just accept in the moment and find love in the moment, and that's the best thing. And then we find out that it's not good to just be sitting in meditation all the time. You actually have to go out and do things, but then you can think about it later, and then that's really the important stuff. And then one of my favorite parts was talking about the ritualistic things that we do to do this type of work. And then the last part gave a little bit of information about frontal lobes, the frontal lobes of our brain. So that's all that was in session 61. It was kind of a hodgepodge of stuff, kind of was all over the place, but good information nonetheless. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, it's really wonderful if we have discussions about this information because it is a lot and can be confusing. So if you would like to comment about anything in this session, please do, and let's have a discussion about it. It helps us all understand it better. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.